Welcome. This will be my video on Spider-Man Brand New Day, the fourth Spider-Man movie in the MCU, solo movie in the MCU continuity. I am going to start with a review that's only going to spoil the MCU leading up to, but not including this film. And after I've done the entire review, I will get into what I call my thoughts section on the film, where I will spoil absolutely everything about this film, but if I don't forget by then, I am going to start it with some stuff that's technically spoilers, but I figure people may want to know before going in. And the movie is PG-13, so will this video be. And I absolutely loved this film. So let's get right into it. I watched this in 3D. I'm going to sound like a broken record. It's not quite Avatar level 3D, which, at this point, there's not that much about the Avatar movies that I'm still excited about other than 3D. But the, James Cameron, if you are watching, never mind. I think I said everything in my specific Avatar videos. Whatever. Moving on. I did appreciate about this that, it is good to great 3D. If Avatar 3D is like, that is the best 3D I've ever watched in any movie. Those movies, I would say that's like a 10. And a 1 is probably one of those from like the 50s or 80s, where it was garbage. This is like an 8, I would say. It is better than a bunch of other MCU 3D. And there is not very much of the, kind of corny thing of throwing something directly at the camera in 3D. It can be fun in some stuff. I don't think it would have worked here. What there is depth to everything. I don't think there was ever... I believe every single shot of this has at least something that there is depth to. Not only like action scenes and such. Like dialogue scenes and such. I also felt like I could practically reach out and, be able to reach the characters with my hands. And it is also well worth watching in a theater. I mean, at this point, I guess tickets are probably more or less sold out wherever you are. But, if somehow you're still able to watch it in a theater, especially with a bunch of other people. I think there were a couple of dozen in my theater. And yeah, it seemed like everyone had a really great time. I think there were about half a dozen people applauding when it ended. So that's a good sign. And I suppose that does... Yeah, so moving on to the writing. So I am not going to go too much into the setup here. I really appreciate that the trailers also did not. Like, I did not know very much about this movie going in, even though I'd watched the trailers many, many times. And I really appreciated that. I was very surprised by quite a lot of things that happened in this. And yeah, what I will say is it does indeed follow up on... Yeah, I'm not gonna be coy here. I already said I'm spoiling those the MCU leading up to, but not including this movie, the spell that made everyone forget Peter Parker. And I will admit I was a tiny bit concerned, but no, this does handle that better, in my opinion. I guess, blanket everything in this video is just my opinion, not speaking for anybody else. But yeah, I think they handled it better than the third, than the No Way Home handled the thing about everyone knowing Peter Parker is Spider-Man and believing that Spider-Man is a villain. I still have a ton of love for that movie, but I'm willing to admit that it is messy. And this one, much, much less so. I was a little concerned because there's a lot in the trailers, and it's like, how are they gonna fit all this together? Actually, there's several things here that felt like, because these, sometimes we forget, but these movies are at least partially made by Sony. Unlike anything else MCU. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, they're getting better people for it, I guess, than they did before, and for the okay. So obviously, I'm not referring to the Raimi trilogy. Those had amazing people working on them, and there's talented people working on all these films. But I'm willing to admit those the Mark Webb duology, could have been better, and the movies that don't have Spider-Man in them at all really aren't very good by and large. The ones that have Spider-Man villain characters, I mean. Anyway, yeah, there were things here that felt like they were trying to do a good job of something that we also saw in the Mark Webb movies. And if they're going to do this good of a job of it, I'm here for it. Now, I suppose I think this is a good time to, yeah, moving on to setup and payoff is handled quite well here. I don't think there was any setup that didn't lead to a payoff, or any payoff that was not properly set up. This shares a, let's see. I recently rewatched Iron Man 3 because the Mandarin is introduced in Iron Man 3, and I was going to watch, of course, which, yeah, also did rewatch Shang-Chi, Legend of the Ten Rings, since that and this share director, Destin Daniel Cretton. And, the Mandarin is in that movie as well. Anyway, yeah, I'm willing to admit, there's a lot I love about Iron Man 3. I'm willing to admit there's some setup without payoff and payoff without setup. But not here, and some of the payoffs are just incredible. Like, there's stuff here that people are going to talk about for a while. And the, yeah, tension and suspense is phenomenal. It's one of those things where, by this point, Peter is really, really good at the whole Spider-Man thing. And that can make it more difficult to have tension and suspense. You don't want him to just sleepwalk through things, but you also want him to, be impressive and such. This delivers a really, really strong balance there. Psychological accuracy is also great. There were characters here that I really, yeah, just some really powerful stuff with that. It stays true to itself. It is, of course, not particularly realistic. It is one of those comic book movies that really embrace being a comic book. There's stuff here that they don't even particularly explain, And I felt they went into the right level of detail here. There is, yeah, there's stuff where I guess I'll very briefly note, there are times where I felt like, okay, you did not really need to verbalize that. There were other cues in the film that told us that, but not terribly much. And there was actually one where I thought that was the case and turned out, oh, it was set up for a payoff. And let's see, so tonally, this is one of the darker of these. Like, I'm not sure I would necessarily say it is the darkest of them all, but okay, no, it is not. But it is darker than the first three of the MCU solo Spider pictures, and I thought that really worked, and that's of course something that many fans have been clamoring for. I was never one of the you know let's see if I can remember. I think Iron Boy was what a bunch of people called Peter because of the relationship to Iron Man. I was never really one of those. I thought that worked, but this is definitely one where he is more on his own, and they get some really great stuff out of that. This feels closer to the other two continuities in that regard. And yeah, I thought they really nailed, like, there's dark stuff, but then there's also stuff that helps lighten the mood. Occasionally it felt slightly misjudged, like there's some jokes here that I'll talk about in the thought section. And yeah, I never felt like it was try hard as far as the darkness goes, and it was very rarely the case for the jokes. I do think, I don't know, maybe it's just me. I feel like more recently the MCU has gotten better at not having excessive comedy. I think they probably realized from the response to Thor 4 that it was reaching critical mass. And I really appreciate them slowing that down here in the more recent one, not only this one. The more recent ones. Anyway, I suppose that pretty much... Yeah, I thought they got a lot out of the... There's at least one concept here that I felt like they did a really great job with. And so I should say I have not read... I've heard the title, and I believe at least I have not read the specific... There's at least one specific comic that this is adapting. Not not familiar with that one. The did read Spider-Man. I'm still not 100% sure when I started, but I know I was reading it in 1999, and I must have stopped around 2007. I know I read Civil War. That was so that's kind of the big fan of the comics that I read, and yeah, there are things here that I've wanted to see in a Spider-Man movie for a while. And yeah, it's so it is a really solid entry into the MCU. It does deliver on the no, yeah. See, that would be a spoiler. Let's see. No, yeah, I'll have to save that for the thought section. Like several of the other most recent ones, it really delivers. I acknowledge that there were some that were not the best, but I do think these last several have been really, really strong. And yeah, so the dialogue, I will say there were a couple of times where it's, that's where some of the try-hard jokes come in. But outside of that, it's one of those cases where they have to explain a lot to catch up. Like hypothetically, you could make this the first. Like if you don't know anything about any of these characters, yeah, you can watch this. Like you just got to pay real close attention, and you will pick up everything. They say everything you need to know, say or show. Now, outside of that, let's see. Yeah, what was the other thing that I wanted to say about that? Yeah, they tend to do pretty, they explain why there's exposition, or It's the kind of dialogue where it doesn't really sound like exposition, even though technically it is. And outside of that, the dialogue tends to be good to great. And let's see. Yeah, a bunch of it sounded like just the way people talk. Yeah, so as far as direction goes, I don't remember the exact details. I know that Daniel Cretton was meant to work on a different MCU movie than this one. I'm not sure what the details are as to why that did not end up happening. I'm just really glad that he was able to direct this, because like I know I've said it before, but he is one of the greatest assets that the MCU has of like yeah, not even like quote unquote only talking about directors. Like he is absolutely amazing, and this has his strengths. Like this has some of the most visually compelling, easy to follow, and just like true to the character action for Spider-Man, any Spider-Man adaptation. It really nails the he's got this ability to make us feel like a set or a location is a real place, like it is. They feel lived in. They don't feel like they were just made, or they in the case of locations, filmed in for a little bit. Like it feels like we're looking a little bit at an actual world. And yeah, he tries to go with practical when he can, and it really pays off. I want them to hire more directors like him and move away, please, as much as you can from all this green screen, the volume, all this stuff, because it just feel like you can tell, oh yeah, that's an actual building, that's an actual, just it makes such a huge difference. I think this has my favorite swinging, including some that is filmed in a way that I was not expecting but loved. And let's see, I think that does. Yeah, I also just the way that he's so great with characters. In both Shang-Chi and the Wonder Man miniseries, he makes me care about, like, in both of those cases, those were characters that I barely knew. I haven't really read the comics that have Wonder Man, or I don't even think, I'm not sure I even knew the name Shang-Chi before I watched that, or yeah, before I heard that they were making that movie. Then I did some research on it, but yeah, like he really gets you to care. Like keep in mind, am I remembering? I think it was the same year. It was definitely around the same time. Shang-Chi, that was right around the same time as the Eternals. Now I still love the Eternals, but I am willing to acknowledge, I mean, I would say Cersei is really our protagonist there. And this is no insult to the actress, because I know she can do better. I've seen her do better in she did better in Captain Marvel, another MCU movie, but she makes, the character is bland. Not because of the actress, but because of writing and possibly also direction. And I get what they were going for, and I really understand this thing of like Marvel, Disney are terrified that people are not gonna like the characters enough. But with Shang-Chi, like on paper, like this could be a very boring character. Also, obviously, credit to Simu Liu. He also really is a big part of why that character came to life like he did, But yeah, with Peter, he also absolutely nails it. Also really appreciated. So this is, I suppose, writing, directing, and acting. I'm praising here, but I really appreciated that this Peter was more mature. That was something that some of us were a little annoyed by. This whole thing of like, oh, don't worry, we're gonna make multiple high school age movies now. Great, so we're not gonna get anywhere near a more mature Peter Parker anytime soon. And now we do. This feels like young adult Peter Parker. I'm well aware we're probably not gonna get like actual, you know, college professor, perhaps even father of a daughter, Peter Parker, in live action anytime soon. But this was still absolutely wonderful. Now, I think, yeah, just he, Destin Daniel Cretton has such a firm grasp on just like I never felt like the story was getting out of hand. Like there are a number of characters and like little subplot things and such here, and somehow like yeah, like I said, it feels less messy than No Way Home. And yeah, I suppose that does pretty much cover the yeah. So I've already talked some about the cinematography, but yeah, like I don't know that I don't think there's a single frame in this that is just like boring looking. It's all really, really compelling to just yeah, this is not a second screen movie. This is a, if you can afford it, like you know, obviously not everybody can right now, but if you can, go to the movie theater, it's well worth watching on a big screen. And yeah, like it really captures the speed and grace of Spider-Man. And I would probably say this is the closest we've gotten to like Raimi's, you know, the way those three movies were shot, Bill Pope. Never underestimate Bill Pope. And that does bring us nicely to the editing. So the yeah, it moves along quite nicely. It feels like they trimmed out any fat. Like there were things where I was like, not sure where this is going, but then, by the end I was like, oh right, okay, fair enough. And yeah, like genuinely they keep managing, not every MCU, but not only recently, I would say, a long time, a lot of the time, they do really manage to give every character something to say and do that you remember that matters, and that is still not always the case with comic book adaptations. And yeah, I was very impressed by the production value, set design, locations, costumes, and makeup. It looks and feels as expensive as it was, and really pays off that so much of it is done practically and such. And these elements also convey things about characters. You see where Peter is staying, for example, and there are significant locations in this where you really get a sense of what it's like, what the people who work there, live there, that sort of thing are like. And the music is also great, like always evokes the reaction that it seeks. There are needle drops and there is original score. The sound design is phenomenal. There are things that they can't quite show as much as they, because it's not R-rated, and so they imply through the sound design, and it's fantastic. And yeah, so I already talked some about Peter. This was also one where they did a really great job making it feel more like, you know, the it feels like we can feel the actual weight of the decision he made weighing on him. And as we start the movie, I'm not going to give away what decision he ends up making, if any, but I will say when we start the movie, and that is, of course, it works well as this, like, it helps to remind people or bring new viewers up to speed, but, we get the text of what he wrote on that paper that he was going to recite to MJ to tell her who he was. And that, yeah, it just, him trying to figure out if he really should tell her or if if it's best not to. That was really, that was, I mean, I guess I don't know if it's the best, but it's near the top of this thing of, because it's a long-running theme in Spider-Man that's, from like some of the earliest comics. Can he tell other people that his true identity? And here is, of course, slightly flipped, because it's not, he can tell MJ that he's Peter Parker without also telling her that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. But yeah, I think, yeah. So I also, I know I've said before, but MJ continues to be one of the best, like, just such a great character. And Zendaya, this is the second time I watched her in, has it been a week? Maybe it's been less than I forget exactly when, but, I recently watched The Odyssey, where she was also amazing. And if you haven't already watched Anthony Gramulia's video about how the success of The Odyssey kind of broke conservatives. Both Anthony and also Saj Sharma, they both made really great videos about that. Fortunately, my wrist is to sort of look up right now, and I do not remember the exact titles, but one of them was something like, The Odyssey broke conservatives' brains or something like that. And now that I mentioned Zendaya, also recommend the, as usual, excellent Elliot Sang Again video, So You've Grown, Has Your Fave Grown With You? Where he talks some about Zendaya, the person, some choices. And I suppose that does, because there's not that much I can say about, I'll just say, yeah, once again, she delivers, and they also give her solid material. And yeah, I mean, I'll say that everyone does a really, really impressive job in this. And I think those are more or less, yeah. Jacob Batalon as Ned Leeds, also still really solid work. And yeah, see, I think other than that, pretty much everyone is a spoiler. Oh wait, right. So this has one of the actors from The Bear, and it was really cool seeing her in something else. She plays a police, I can never remember titles, captain, chief, something in this. And yeah, solid job. At one point, she orders some food, and I couldn't help but wonder if she's going to take it home, figure out something for a recipe for the bear from it. And yeah, I think that is just about the ones I can talk about without spoiling anything. And yeah, it's also really well paced. It never felt like it was either rushing or dragging its feet. And it is one of those where there is action from early on, but it also does not ever just devolve into nothing but action. The climax is, I guess I'll just, since I'm spoiling the MCU leading up to, but not including this film, I will briefly note one of my few issues, and I don't necessarily think this is Destin Daniel Cretton, making the mistake. I could have met, it feels like a studio note compared to the rest of the movie. Maybe I'm wrong, but in that movie, the climax, the Shang-Chi, in Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings, the climax goes on after Tony Leung has perished, his character rather, and I don't think it should have. I could have appreciated if the massive soul eater had like transformed him into a dragon so that he would be still fighting with his father, and then you'd have a thing of like, well, the only way he can defeat it is if he kills his father or something like that, But as soon as that thing kills his father, and then it's just these dragons that we literally met a few minutes ago fighting. I mean, I get, world is at stake here, but it's just not the same degree of emotion. And this movie, I'm not going to spoil the details, but this one does not make that mistake. So whoever's mistake it was either didn't work on this, or maybe they accepted, because I was not the only person who pointed that out back when that movie first came out. And I think that does pretty much... Yeah, so the effects, so obviously not everything can be practical. The CG looks fantastic, and they really get a lot out of what they can do with, essentially with CG and superpowers. Like, if the budget is there for it, you can do anything, and they make good use of that, great use of that, without going overboard. Because the thing is also, if you remember early CG, they just went way too far, and I think that does, yeah, fantastic stunts as well. And yeah, I think that does more or less. So yeah, I don't know, I more or less said already, but just to really make sure it comes across, as far as action, sci-fi, and comedy go, the quality, variety, and delivery of elements are very, very impressive here. And yeah, it in some ways pushes the PG-13, but not as much as, it's not Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, for example. And I yeah, I don't know, did I already say? But yeah, the superpower use is creative, and it's the right amount, and they really did like try to like, I feel like with so many of these MCU movies, and not exclusively them, but they will like sit down and just go over, okay, what superpowers can we include here, and how can we use them in the most compelling way? How can we have two characters, both of whom have some kind of superpower or skill or something, face off against each other in a way that is, you know, something you can't get outside of comic book media. And yeah. So there is one post-credit scene. You will have to sit through all of the credits to get there. And yeah, I don't know. I don't want to hype it up. I think a lot of people will be happy if they stay and watch it, but I wouldn't necessarily say that it is something that you just like will never ever forgive yourself if you do leave the theater slightly before that part. And yeah, so that brings us to yeah. So my full ranking of Spider-Man movies and Spider-Man related movies, ranking from worst to best. And yeah, so I'll start on, yeah. So Morbius, Venom 1, Madam Web, Raimi Man 3, Venom 2, Venom 3, and then we get the ones that I hold in higher regard than those. Raimi Man 2, Raimi Man 1, The Amazing Spider-Man 2 and 1, Homecoming, Far From Home, Spider-Verse 1, Spider-Verse 2, No Way Home, Brand New Day, Civil War, Avengers 3, and Avengers 4. And then we get to my ranking. And apologies, this is of course going to take a little bit. I'll speed run through it. Feel free to slow it down if need be. But my ranking of all of the MCU movies, worst to best. And for these, I've found something to love about all of them, but the bottom one, less so. Anyway, Iron Man 2, Dark World, Black Widow, Captain America 1, Thor 1, Ragnarok, Hulk, Ant-Man 1, Ant-Man 2, The Marvels, Love and Thunder, Homecoming, Doctor Strange 1, Iron Man 3, Iron Man 1, Avengers 1, Ultron, Ant-Man 3, Madness, Far From Home, No Way Home, Guardians of the Galaxy Holiday Special, One Last Kill, Captain America 4, Thunderbolts, Fantastic Four. I don't know. I forget why I put a 1 there. Whatever. Getting distracted. Guardians of the Galaxy 1, Brand New Day, Guardians of the Galaxy 2, Black Panther 1, Winter Soldier, Werewolf, Deadpool 3, Shang-Chi, Eternals, Guardians 3, Wakanda Forever, Civil War, Infinity War, and Endgame. And with that, my rating for this one is a 10 gloriously visually realized Spider-Man stories in the MCU out of 10. And that gets us to the thoughts. The thought section. There we go. So from here on out, I am spoiling the movie, but I will briefly start with a couple of things that, some stuff that's mild. I'll let you know before I get into stuff you don't want to know before having watched the film. But basically, I'll talk some about what's in the Yes, a little bit of first I'll start with some stuff that's in the trailers that you might be wondering, yes, I would say they did a great job on The Punisher and Hulk, and to an extent also The Hand. That one gets a little bit more complicated. I'll get into it after I've talked some more. Yeah, I guess that is what I should say before. Yeah. Okay. So from here on out, I'm spoiling. We're doing big spoilers. I'm gonna try to keep it chronological, but yeah. Do not keep watching after this point if you haven't already watched the movie, unless you are 100% sure you won't. And some of what I'm going to say is not going to make sense if you haven't watched the movie and remember it. Anyway, yeah, so I really appreciated that we open on just, I think this is the best they've done so far in one of these of, like, you know, time passing. I think this does a much better job than TASM 2 or Mark Webb's Webman 2. You know, with I'm not spoiling that movie, don't worry, but you know, this montage that conveys that time has passed, and this is how well Spider-Man is doing. And the fact that they, you know, it works well that it is Peter's I mean, let's say curiosity about the yeah, the other you know, about Ned and MJ. It feels excessive to call it stalking because he starts on that later, you know. He doesn't get into that immediately, I mean. And yeah, so the let's see. And that's of course where we get some of those shots. And we, you know, several people had already guessed that, theorized correctly that I do not know their names, but there's a guy throwing like sharp, were those boomerangs maybe? And there's someone who's got like, I mean, they kind of look like ice skates, but yeah, you know, sharp things on shoes and such. And yeah, those are just the montage. Because there's so much else that we didn't see everything in the trailer, it did not bother me the way that Webman 2's Rhino did. And I suppose that does... Yeah, and also just I really appreciated that we sit with that sadness for a while, and by the end, like, there's been a release of the tension, but it's not. They didn't undo. If anyone from Disney or Marvel is watching this, thank you so much. Like, please treat your workers better. But thank you so much for not just undoing. A lot of us were. I wasn't like thinking, oh, this movie's gonna be terrible because they're gonna. I was a tiny bit worried that it would be like, they're probably gonna undo the. But no, by the end, you know, yeah, Ned and MJ now know Peter, but Peter doesn't end up with MJ. She is still with Paul, I guess, by the end of the film. You know, I mean, he sure doesn't show his face much, but it's not like she's like flirting with Peter either. Like they act like friends who haven't seen each other in a while, basically, you know. And the but yeah, because they're at the start of the film, we have the thing about MJ's the happiest she's ever been. She can't even pretend otherwise. She is smiling. She's, you know, like, last we saw her smiling like that was when she was with Peter and they were having a good time. So he is watching her be the happiest she's ever been. Like, literally, that's Ned's phrasing, but she agrees to it without him, without Peter. And yeah, like, that is in some ways the lowest low for MCU Peter so far. And I think, yeah, I have more to say about that, but I want to spread it out over the video. So let's move on with the, yeah, I think it worked that, you know, the cops like Spider-Man here. You know, I don't know if we need more live action of cops not really liking Spider-Man. I don't know. If you think, if you're working on one of these and you have an amazing idea, sure, go for it. But, you know, not just because, like, I get it. It's in some of the comics, it's in, you know, some of the other movies and such, but I do think it works well here. You know, I mean, she's sort of the Commissioner Gordon to his Batman, and yeah, I thought that worked. and it helps us show, because they're at the start, he has no idea what her kids' names are. And by the end he does, because he is relating more to other people. He is choosing to have a life, not only be Spider-Man, because only being Spider-Man just does not work for him, and that's always been, I think this is one of the best for the balance as far as the live action ones go. I really, really felt like he is genuinely struggling, and it wasn't like frustrating to watch as it can sometimes be, especially if the director is struggling to keep a good balance themselves, which I do think, I'm sorry, I know some people love the Raimi movies more than I do. I prefer other Raimi movies, if he's going to make more superhero stuff, I'd rather more Doctor Strange, more Darkman maybe. I don't know. I'm not holding out hope. I know Darkman's probably... I can live with there only being one movie, because as we all know, there is only one Darkman movie, and anyone thinking otherwise is just like objectively wrong, obviously, because like, can you even imagine if they tried to make more than one, and then Sam Raimi was not directing, Bill Pope was not DPing, they might even have to recast Liam Neeson? I do really like Arnold Vosloo. I think he's amazing elsewhere. He was a high point in those Mummy movies with Brendan Fraser, but I do not like the other two Darkman, especially the second one. Third one I can tolerate more. Anyway, yeah, and I'm also willing to acknowledge Webb also struggled with the balance, and really some of the other MCU ones did as well, but this one, it did work really well. Anyway, I think that does... I will also say, the yeah, I'm afraid I forget her name, but on The Bear they call her Tina, or T, so I'll call her T. I am very impressed that she is able to, I kept waiting, because, the trailer showed the scene where he's fighting damage control. I thought that meant that the cops had also turned on Spidey, but that did not end up happening. She has tremendous forgiveness. There's that part where, she's like, you almost, like, you could have killed that cop. Like, do you understand that if a civilian kills a cop, unlike the other way around, there might actually be consequences for the killer? And yeah, she has a tremendous level of forgiveness, because not only is that the first time that she even mentions his the way he treats cop cars in this, that might also have been the first time that the screenwriter realized, oh, right, cop cars have people inside. How many cop cars got, like, flung through the air, and then there was just no follow-up of, like, no, the cop's fine? Like, is this set in some kind of... I mean, I know the MCU is not quite our own world. Maybe most cop cars by this point in the MCU are just, like, Waymo or something. I don't know. And that was also, I don't know, it was a little bit funny to me that was when it was like, Spider-Man, what are you doing? I mean, I appreciate that was the one that was most his fault, but the other ones, it was kind of like, why isn't he trying to stop that? And he does make sure to stop when there's the part with the bus full of tourists. So I don't know, I guess maybe despite his friendship with T, Spidey, and Holland Spidey is ACAB, and probably watch the Web movies. I think that does bring us nicely to... Yeah, so while I wouldn't have hated getting more of Scorpion, I do think that overall they delivered what I really wanted from him, because like the thing is, like we already have his backstory to get that out of the way. I mean, yeah, we don't know exactly where he got the suit or whatever. I mean, at this point, Stark Tech probably, Tony's been dead for years, but he's still creating villains all over the place, so why not? But the um the thing about Scorpion is, I should start by noting, in the comics, I love a lot about Scorpion. There is at least one Spider-Man game that I've played where, I mean, I was already loving it, but as soon as I saw that I got to fight the Scorpion, I was like, wow. And the thing about Scorpion is, in the original comic, his visual design and what he can do to, why he's interesting in, fighting Spider-Man makes up for how kind of silly the explanation is. You can Google it if you want. I won't bore you with the details, but that is something that they did deliver on here. Because Spider-Man can't quite, he can sometimes struggle to get close enough to hit directly with fists or kicks because of the scorpion tail. And the scorpion tail can also be effective against the webs. So Spider-Man in general has multiple problems there, and yeah, also just appreciated that they continue to have Spidey fight someone he hasn't fought before. I'm really glad that, I mean, yeah, technically Green Goblin was in No Way Home, but that was bringing back Willem Dafoe. It's not the same as just immediately jumping back to that. But yeah, I did think they got some really great stuff out of that, and using the web to, the part where he like uses Scorpion as like a, like he hits him against the cop car. That was yeah, very memorable. And yeah, so that brings us to the yeah, and I quite appreciated this. So in the montage, we have the bit about, this young woman, maybe around Peter's age, who's like, oh hey, we live on the same floor. And so he makes sure to change floors to one that no one ever comes up to, and is even told, I mean, if you like asbestos, and yeah, I mean, he's got a healing factor, so yeah, he should be fine. Obviously, no one in real life should have to live in, a place that has asbestos or lead pipes or that sort of thing, even if some rich people do think that poor people should. And yeah, so I like the element of Evie, in part because, like, clearly his own design. This is not, I'm afraid I forget. Was she? No, he had decided not to call her Liz. I don't remember what he ended up calling the one in Homecoming, but, he had, that was a Stark AI. This time, he made his own. I did not think we needed her to say the words sensory overload when it was happening, because I personally thought that's what the sound design and visuals are conveying, so we don't also need it spelled out like that. I don't know. I guess it's not impossible. There was like a test screening where someone was like, what's happening? Why is Spider-Man acting like that? But anyway, other than that, I did think it worked well. As Spider-Man, he has very few people to talk to. It really, until he meets back up with Ned and MJ, it's really just Evie and T. And then once and briefly Frank, and then more Frank when MJ is back. Anyway, I think and also just, yeah, the fact that he was able to build all this stuff on his own, that is one of the things I love about Peter. Peter Parker, he's able to build all this stuff on his own, and this was one of the first times the Web Man films also did pretty well. I would have liked more in the Raimi Man movies. But yeah, seeing him actually make all this stuff, you know, yeah, that was really cool. And I think that does pretty much cover that entire... Let's see. I need to think about what was the other thing. I feel like there was something else in this part of the film, but I'm struggling to recall what it was. No, yeah, I guess that does pretty much get us to the tank, doesn't it? Right, and this is where we get the first indication of the mutation. You know, his wrists, or one of them anyway. And yeah, and we see him like practicing with the web shooters and talking about feels a little bit off. And yeah, later it's gonna feel off in a different way. It's gonna fly off. And yeah, so the armored vehicle chase was really, really great. And yeah, like so I need to talk a little bit about Frank. So I think I'll get the following out of the way, just so it's not, just to have it said. I didn't love some of the jokes they did with him. I didn't think that it was wrong to have jokes with him at all. I knew that there would be. And I... No, yeah, that... okay, need to finish my thought. I didn't love the thing about, were you crying over me? I can't believe I just caught you crying. It's like, really? What, Frank? I don't really feel like... Listen, I get that this can't be completely the same characterization as the Netflix, but I think it's maybe also just like we literally just got one last kill. Like, really? You wanna... This feels... yeah. What I'm getting at is I don't think Frank would react like that. I think like he might... Like I could see him just saying, "Yeah, I'm crying. So what? I'm human," But yeah, I don't know. I do also appreciate, they probably felt the need to, it's one of those things of like, if he is constantly as hypermasculine as in the other characterizations, as Bernthal plays him, it's going to be really at odds with the much gentler Peter. I did not need the grunting from inside the... I didn't mind that I thought it was sweet. I wish they had not included the grunting when he's got the mask on. I thought it was sweet that he put the mask and the gloves on and is waving. I didn't hate the idea of having a shot from in there, but please no grunting. That just felt off, But other than that, I love that this does actually follow... So it's been many, many years since I read, but I did once read the original comic that introduces the Punisher, the Spider-Man comic. That and it is this thing of, it's similar to, the Daredevil versus Punisher thing. Punisher wants to kill, thinks less is a half measure, and yeah, Spider-Man doesn't, Daredevil doesn't, and that's... and from what I recall, in that original comic, it agrees with Peter. It is his book after all. And then later, Punisher got a bunch of his own comics, some of which agree with Punisher. This movie very clearly agrees with Peter. Let's briefly go over. So basically, there are 2 times in this film where Peter prevents Frank from killing someone that Frank is confident he has to kill. in order to protect innocent people. He spells that out. One of them is a kindly old woman who is being mind controlled. And also keep in mind, as that I will say, I would Frank really not have thought about that and all, but okay. They need him to be like this, but there were a bunch of explosives in that vehicle. If it had blown up on a city street, there would have been a number of civilian casualties. The other person is a teenager who, yes, is at the time doing something wrong, but she doesn't stop because she dies. She stops because she realizes, she connects with Peter. And yeah, Peter is completely in the right about saving people. And that also feels like genuinely, this is a continuation of No Way Home. He spends that movie getting to the point where he agrees with May. It is worth trying to save everyone. It is his responsibility. I won't say the line, don't worry. And yeah, I really love that, because that's the thing. When you bring Punisher into PG-13, I'm not going to pretend like I wasn't one of the people worried about that. But I will say, I immediately I would like to say that it was immediate. At some point, I thought about it and I came to the conclusion it could work if it's not that he's constantly killing people, because PG-13 Punisher killing people, I don't think anybody wants to see that. But if he keeps almost killing someone and being prevented from it by Spider-Man, that could work. And, I think it did. I'm really, really glad that they realized that, because let's see. If we're going to get an amazing killer just taking out a bunch of people, it worked for Winter Soldier, for example. But with John Bernthal's Punisher, the first time we saw him, he was brutal and bloody and gory. And we've seen him take out so many people so violently that if we see him take out even one person and it's like the PG-13 just makes you really sleepy, leaves no blood bullet, just no, that wouldn't work at all. And I am very interested to see, because I feel like I've heard that there are people working on some of the stuff that don't want this to be the last time we see the Punisher in live action, John Bernthal playing. I would be fascinated to see if there will be some kind of, I doubt that he'll like immediately stop killing entirely, but I could maybe see, like, what if they do one of those stories that, it wouldn't be the first time that they had Punisher meet someone that, like, his first instinct is, oh, this person deserves to die because they've done this, this, and this. And then he, like, recognizes their humanity and they work together and he fights to keep that person alive instead, trying to redeem them. And, you could maybe have it be that he tries to avoid killing, and then by the end he like kills the person, at the very top. And then it's like, listen, baby steps, okay? Maybe eventually I'll get there. And let's see. Yeah, I don't know. I wouldn't rule out if they at some point decide, you know what, it's time to just retire Bernthal Punisher. Maybe it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if that was That's watching Bernthal twice in such a short amount of time was also great. He was also amazing in Odyssey. Anyway, maybe the last MCU John Bernthal Punisher story they do, he has a chance to kill someone and instead make sure they go to prison for life or something like that. You could even have a thing of like, early in the film or episode or special or whatever, you have a thing about like he says something like, you know, someone says something like, you don't have to kill. There are other ways, and he could like list multiple things, and one of them is like, what? Hide a recording device on my person, get them to confess so they'll spend the rest of their life in prison, and then he'll again say that's a half measure, and then there at the end, you know, he, you could have a thing of him, saying that he's not, he says something to get the other person to accidentally confess or maybe threaten someone, and then Frank pulls out the recording device, and we see the person go to jail, and then Frank like burns the, gets rid of the guns, burns the skull vest thing. That still looks great, by the way. I think it might, is it the same design as One Last Kill? It's not far off, I feel like, at least. Anyway, I think that does pretty much. Yeah, I like that we don't need to, because like, who needs to see the first meeting between Punisher and MCU Peter? Like, listen, if you say we should have a story at some point that has that, okay, sure. If you think there's a really interesting story to tell, I personally thought this was a more interesting story than, because like, I kind of love that they're like this, it's this thing of like, him again, really? Because that, I didn't need them to play it as much for laughs as they ended up doing, but like that is sometimes how costumed heroes react to Punisher, And he calls out, he says that it's wrong for Peter to be wearing the mask. And that, I guess, does nicely segue into, I think that's, I really hope Destin Daniel Cretton does more of these. And also credits to the writers for sure. But the whoever wrote it, once again, cannot look up right now, but the way that it manages, because there are a bunch of characters here, but they all relate to each other, that's like, that was the big problem with Raimi Man 3, Webman 2, in this one, like, there is a clear connection, like, okay, so other than, like, obviously we need Peter, MJ, and Jean in this movie. The movie does not function if you remove one of them. But hypothetically, you could maybe write out Frank, Hulk, Scorpion. Okay, I'll agree that Scorpion didn't necessarily need to be. That was essentially for the fight. But both Frank, Frank, Hulk, and Jean all say something about the way Peter / Spider-Man is living his life. Hulk, or Banner, points out, what makes you so sure that you can tell apart the good from the bad in this mutation? Jean tells him, the way you're living is not healthy. That was a funny way for her to, the way she phrased it. I think it was something along the lines of, you live the way a stereotypical 20-something single guy thinks, or like a, is living. It's like you're like a caricature or something, which does sound like the way a teenager would say it. And she points out, are you Peter or are you Spider-Man? And Frank points out about the mask. And by the end, Peter has decided he is both. I wonder if there's going to be, maybe I'm forgetting, but so far, I think nearly every time a costumed hero in one of these live-action movies has been asked, you have to choose between these two, they choose both. And that's not a trope that I personally think we need to bring back or keep alive further. But so that resolves the gene thing. He purposely takes off the inhibitor and then is able to, because now that he's embracing all of himself, he can, turn off or level out the mutation, however you want to say it. So that resolves the Hulk part, and Frank accepts. You need to keep your identity secret. So that resolves the Frank part. It's so well, put together there. And that's, I guess I'll just briefly note. So one of the ways that No Way Home is messier, I mean, as soon as the whole, once the spell misfires, he talks to the dean or whatever, and there's the action scene, talks to the dean, and then you can all go to MIT now. So that's just resolved. For the rest of the movie, it doesn't matter that the reveal in the post credits of Far From Home. And in this one, they don't actually, the entire movie is heavily affected by the spell at the very end of No Way Home, where everyone forgets Peter Parker. And the Jean is technically introduced very early. We just have no idea. We don't know the further details. But I don't know. 20 minutes into the film is the first time, I think, that she makes some appearance there as the Anyway, I think that does. I'm glad that the trailers did not give away that Frank brought 2 grenade launchers. Honestly, probably because he knew there was some chance that Spider-Man would show up. But yeah, the fact that Peter, because I was expecting him to web the first one. I didn't know there was going to be a second one, but instead he tosses it, and then and that is also kind of a funny way. It's one of those things, it's not really taking away the badassness of Punisher. I wouldn't really say much of anything in the movie does that, to me at least, but it is acknowledging, it's having a little bit of fun with the fact, because the thing about him is that he's got all these guns, and if you frame it like that, then it becomes funny instead of intense. And let's see, I think that does pretty much bring us to the so Peter's unable to prevent the armored car from getting to the DODC, and there's the big explosion, and there's the freeing of Scorpion, and it was really, really cool, the thing about Peter trying to get ahead of and stop the various ones, and the jumping between. And I'll acknowledge, I think it might have been Nando who pointed out that the power seemed a little bit more Shadow King, that's the name, rather than Jean Grey, and that it was also kind of intense for Jean Grey to be doing this. I think they can still, I would say by the end of this, we have sympathy for her. And I do agree that it is, it's a lot to forgive. I think that is just something the MCU has been doing recently. I mean, Thunderbolts was full of characters like that. Even introducing Bob as a new one, like there by the end, he's done some really messed up stuff, and I appreciate, technically, again, and he's sympathetic, but he still did do those things, and it wasn't all void. Some of it was Bob, and let's see, Shang-Chi killed someone when he was 14, for his father and for revenge. Anyway, I think that does pretty much... I don't know. I think they can do something really compelling with it, especially if they want to, it can help explain why other, why other costumed characters might attack them, even if both consider themselves to be the good guys, If the thing they know about the other one is, hey, you killed someone, And I think, yeah, so I guess that does bring us... I'm pretty sure that's when he talks to Yelena. So I am ecstatic to get more of the Hawkeye miniseries style Yelena. The one who catches a bottle, I think it was bottle, something thrown at her, looking intense, and then goes, "Hi." That was just so good. I appreciate, Thunderbolts. There wasn't really room for that. She needs to be more of a badass in that one. There is a little bit of fun there. And they did have the, in that one, since Alexei was also there, we had the really great back and forth between them. But this is something I really like about Pugh's Yelena. And like this does feel like how she would respond to Spider-Man, And I mean, it was obviously also in part, like I remember, honestly, at first I wasn't sure it was real, and then as soon as this scene started, I was like, oh, now I get it. But there was a headline, I guess weeks ago by now, maybe more, that said something along the lines of, in, Brand New Day, Yelena and Peter are going to see each other naked. Or undressed, something like that. He did still have his underpants on. And yeah, I mean, the it is obviously at least partially for just the joke of the awkwardness, and they do really like undressing Tom Holland in these movies, don't they? I mean, I'm not gonna pretend like I don't understand why. Is it in his contract? Did he demand it was in his contract? Because I think I might if I worked out to look like that. But yeah, I think all four of these movies have at least one bit where he is at least shirtless in front of another character. And yeah, that again, yeah, with Yelena, you also have this thing of, and with her, like there's the bit about, you always wear that mask, and, but she also, when she sees the other two, she's like, I'm just glad that the sad man has friends. Because that was something, and that's such a perfect... I'm sorry, I appreciate not everybody loves the MCU. I do think they really, not all the time, but when they get the characters right, they just nail it, because that is exactly it. Yelena, at this point in her journey, is where she would tell someone else, you need people in your life. She wasn't there at the start of Thunderbolts, but by the end, she was. And this is after Thunderbolts. And so here we have the thing, so yeah, that was great. And let's see, I think that is the... Yeah, and also, it didn't feel like a forced way to get in there, and I appreciated, like, it is obviously, very silly, goofy throwaway joke that, oh, that really is her office. She actually has, her office is in this, sauna. Ah, that's not what it's called. I forget what it's called. Whatever. but yeah, it is confirmed. Yes, she is. Or yeah, it's not a surprise that she's still a member of. So yeah, here she calls them the New Avengers. So I don't know if that's supposed to be because no, yeah, she didn't like Avengers with a Z. So I guess that's maybe why. But it confirms that Spider-Man knows about the New Avengers and that they actually operate. Like if you have the right connections, you can get an audience with a member of the New Avengers, and yeah, if they know something, they will help. If the potato size is accurate to their job description, that is. And yeah, I mean, it makes sense. Peter, it's mind control. Red Room. That makes perfect sense. At first I wasn't sure how, because that was another thing. Like I wasn't even sure how is Yelena gonna fit into this movie at all. But yeah, mind control, Red Room makes sense. And appreciate they also fit in. What did she say? Vision, something like that. Vinesh. I'm gonna stop trying because I'm pretty sure I'm getting further away. But yeah, those another reference to their particular culture. Similar to yeah, we've gotten other references in when she appears. There'll be a reference to something. I'm just gonna move on because I think I'm getting dangerously close to over explaining, almost as bad as when Trump bombed that unbelievably basic joke that because you see, if he rushes up the stairs, he can't also do this other thing. Wow. Anyway, I think that does bring us to the yeah, I think that's when he goes to the DODC. And at that point, he almost gets himself killed by refusing to take off the mask. And yeah, I mean, I'm not sure they were intending to comment on ICE, but I'm okay. So Peter is complying, mostly at least. He's not doing anything threatening, saying anything threatening. He clearly is where he should be, like he's not trespassing or something, and yet they are pointing guns at him and about to execute him on the spot, seemingly, until he gets bailed out by someone, yeah, with more, the guy in charge there. I don't know. Sounds like the DODC are a real good stand-in for ICE right here. But but yeah, that at first I was like, why are they saying, oh yeah, he's got arachnid stuff in him? But then later we get the scan again, and oh, mutation is it's increasing because of the stress. And I'm sorry, I do think that's a much more interesting thing to do with that than Raimi Man 2. And a better way to do it, and I'm gonna stop because I've already talked that movie to death elsewhere. Anyway, I think there are obviously amazing things about it. Anyway, the yeah, so he talks to him, and I will say at first I thought that he was lying about not knowing VMAX, but yeah, later it is. Anyway, moving on. I think that does bring us to the yeah. Yeah, and the thing about, both of them saying to the other, I'm sorry, because of my job, there's just some things I can't divulge. And I guess that's also a good place to briefly talk about yeah, you have to think about like, well, whatever it is that you don't want, you know, the psychic to reach, I'm guessing it's behind that big door. And let's see, we had the other thing with yeah, so by the end of it, this does still say that cops are good, but I did appreciate that I think I've already made clear my stance on that. But it does acknowledge that some government agencies, you know, they might like, because that's the thing, like they are almost kind of trying to, I want to say the term is woke wash, because he's talking about like, oh, I mean, some people just see problems and I see solutions, yeah, hypothetically they could be dangerous, but they could also be a tool. And then later he rephrases that to, you can be a weapon for us, basically, and yeah, I mean, that is the thing. Government agencies there should always be checks and balances. I'm not saying that we shouldn't have like government or something, but yeah, they should not be able to just get away with corruption and causing harm. If you do research, you can find, there are a number of cases where leftists have documented, yeah, federal agencies trying to fight leftism in some really messed up ways. Because, like, listen, critique our ideas, obviously, for sure. That's how they get improved. But some of those tactics, yeah. Anyway, I do obviously got to talk about. So everyone who there was a section specifically for them. Uh, let's see. It wasn't called possessed, but I forget what word they used. But the ones taken, I'm just gonna say possessed. The possessed, there were more possessed than there were stunt people working on this, which I also appreciate. Some stunt people will, wear multiple costumes and play different whatever. But there were a lot of them, dozens and dozens of maybe 50 or something. Just glancing at that list as the end credits rolled, they all did amazing. Like, holy crap. The voice, the delivery, I love the little parts where we would realize, oh, that's actually someone, although I suppose that was less with like extras, that was more with, but yeah, Zendaya, amazing work as did you really think MJ would puke? Oh my God. And the thing with, you really think I'm Scorpion? Yeah, I think that does cover. Yeah, so the next thing was when Peter, I think that's when he goes home and then he like passes out. And he's like holding his wrists and screaming. That really reminds me of me. Have I been bitten by a spider? But yeah, very, very cool that he wakes up and he's like cocooned himself in the other form, and he falls down and he's struggling to use his webs, and yeah, really, really cool. And then accidentally, the yeah, that's the part where he ends up stealing some clothes, and is that my shirt? No, of course not. And we see Juicy across the back of them, and I don't know. I hope that wasn't like a gay panic joke or like oh, look at a guy wearing women's clothing kind of joke. I really feel like those are just like, okay, if members of the LGBTQIA plus community make those jokes, I think that's fine, and obviously not even for me to comment on. But I don't know. I don't think that you know. Basically, if you're not a member. Oh wait, does he have a connection to? I know it's very. He did that. What was it called? Lip sync battle thing, which is popular with a number of members of the community. Maybe that's why they put it in there. It might be a reference to that. Fair enough. That's obviously yeah, it's been a while since I watched it, but yeah, obviously very impressive. He's multi-talented. Anyway, I think that is... Let me think. No, yeah. That gets us to the part where he is like testing. That was also, it reminded me a little of the testing stuff in Webman 1, and I thought this worked better. The thing about like, okay, so this is our fourth prototype. Well, let's test it in the field, and it almost immediately fails. And later, MJ points out what the problem is. Because she's also smart. I love when they let her contribute. That was one of my main criticisms of her character in the Raimi movies. And let's see, because I mean, Homecoming showed she is smart. She gives the winning answer to the decathlon. Anyway, I think that is and so he accidentally drops the thing, and we already knew from before that that's like a web bomb if he throws it like that, because that's something he used against the armored car. And then now he can't tell when Jean's mind is in someone. And is that, I think, yeah, and that's when we have the thing about Jean is inside the apartment. Now, ultimately, they never do explain how she knew that was his apartment. How to, But I suppose, let's see, if she's using the Spidey tracker, maybe every so often she notices he sure does return to this building a lot. But that was really great. She's walking around touching stuff, and then she finds the bit with MJ. Oh, that's, yeah. And see, I don't know if I can put it into words in any language that I personally speak how well this letter is used here. Because like I think I did say that I found it frustrating in my video for No Way Home. This thing of, because like the big thing is that he's taking away her agency in the matter. I appreciate, this sadder, more lonely Peter. I'm not gonna be one of those, like, apparently Tom Holland was weirded out by some, releasing their inner J. Jonah Jameson, like, I want picture with Spider-Man, and I want him to be really miserable. But I do think there are a lot of great stories where Peter Parker, Spider-Man, is really sad. But this movie does address that he took away her agency. She confronts him about that, and he doesn't make excuses. He says why and apologizes, and they are by the end not together romantically, and I'm not sure they ever will be. And that is in part because she finds the letter, and the letter is also how Jean finds out about MJ. And that literally does mean that MJ would have been better protected if Peter had told MJ the truth. He thought he was protecting her, and he, very specifically was not, by not telling her and then keeping this letter. And it's also the fact that the conflict between, is he Spider-Man or is he Peter Parker? He keeps this as sort of a last memento of Peter Parker. And because of that, it goes wrong. I will say, please correct me if I'm wrong, because I want to be wrong about this. I'm not sure I understand how it ended up at Punisher's place. Like, did he bring the letter after? Because, like, I remember it was in the hands of Jean up in Peter's loft, and then I'm not entirely sure how it ended up with because like did Peter pick it up and then accidentally and put it in his suit and then accidentally drop it at Frank's, or I don't know. I didn't quite. Did Jean bring it between mind jumps and put it in MJ's pocket before jumping it, or right after? I maybe I missed something. Anyway, I think that, but yeah, you have the thing about, maybe I'll go see how MJ's doing. And yeah, I really appreciate, like, so by the end of this, she is sympathetic, but Jean does get to be like a kind of the engaging in evil actions central villain, at least major antagonist here. I guess an argument could be made that the secret central villain is technically the DOTC head, but yeah, I I quite appreciate that. We that's again something that Destin Daniel Cretton, he doesn't really hold back on these. That's we need more of that in the MCU. They've done pretty well in recent years, but there was a while where they just didn't quite go far enough, in my opinion, with making the villains like. I'm sorry, that's part of the appeal of these. Like, if you want to make a comic book adaptation where the villain is not like super evil, then I think it needs to be a little bit more like some kind of exploration, like a deconstruction or something. But if, a lot of the MCU ones, they're more straightforward, and thus, yeah, I mean, a lot of my favorite villains are comic book media villains. Anyway, so yeah, Peter, very clever. The thing about, following and, the helicopter and then webbing that up. I will say I don't think we needed to see. I think I'm gonna try to. Okay, so basically, we are told, he, sorry, she, Jean can only jump 10 feet. I think it was 10 feet at a time. No, wait, 10 meters. That's what the subtitle said. I don't remember. I don't, you know, we use the metric system here in Denmark. 10 meters, and obviously there wasn't anyone within that when that person was in the helicopter. So either she just withdrew her mind and then jumped into someone closer to her and was close enough to get to MJ before Peter did, or maybe that worker had like a walkie and got someone close enough using the walkie, because like obviously how would that worker get out of there? Peter webbed up the doors, and yeah, I think it worked. I liked it a lot better than the Raimi version. The thing about like trying to figure out how to fire the webs, and I also really like that. At first he acts like, oh, it's this big. Oh, how do I work this? I can't make it. You know, uh, it just fires way too much web at a time. And then he realizes, oh, I can just web stop. And I acknowledge that it's not completely consistent, but I think the parts where he doesn't say it, it would have not worked for the tone if he did. But then later, when he's fighting the hand, he realizes he can actually use this because that's how he takes care of them. He couldn't take care of them with the, mechanical web shooters. I guess this is a decent time to briefly talk about the hand. So I personally liked the hand in the Netflix shows. I didn't love them there. It did end up kind of, I think season 2 of Daredevil would probably have been better without them. And I don't know. I mean, there are some of my favorite characters connected to them, though. So it's not that. I do. There's a connection between Colleen and the hand. There's a like Madame Gao, fantastic. Nobu. I'm afraid I forget her name. Victoria, maybe. Sigourney Weaver, Elektra. There's some really great characters there, but ultimately the story of season 2 is a little bit overloaded, and here they essentially exist just to fight. And I didn't necessarily think that was a bad thing, because I also don't really know where to even go with them. It feels like, Defenders, by the end of that season, I don't know what else the MCU would do with the hand. That kind of feels like what else would be their master plan? I'm not saying there can't be. I just don't know what. I'm not sure I can personally think of one that wouldn't feel like a retread of something else and would also fit the tone the MCU go for. But the I don't know. I guess if they did do more, hypothetically, maybe Daredevil Born Again season 3 or some other, something like that, maybe they could. Because technically this is a reintroduction. There are multiple factions of them in Defenders and such in Netflix. Anyway, but yeah, they are characters who look cool and are a significant impediment to Spider-Man because of what they, because they can also, oh, he'll use the web to get high above them. Okay, they'll jump onto each other and up to get him, and that's also the kind of thing you didn't really get stuff like that in the Netflix ones, and I appreciate. I think they got a lot of great stuff out of the practical, the stunt work and all that. I'm not calling for those to have done something different. I'm just saying if we're going to do more hand, I appreciate doing stuff like this, similar to how I like that, now Daredevil swings more. Obviously they couldn't do that when it was all practical. Anyway, so Peter finds MJ, and I appreciate that Jean made sure there was just a little bit of an argument there. And I also like the detail that she is not scared while swinging. Although, that again is not completely consistent, because later she also isn't after it's no longer Jean, but whatever. It is because Jean is not afraid. And, because MJ specifically says later, I feel like I'm slipping off you. Maybe she also felt like that while Jean was in her head, and Jean was thinking, this'll mess with his head. If that ends up happening, that's fine. But yeah, it's a hint towards that. And it was also in the trailer, and I remember seeing someone say, oh, that means she really must remember him, which I don't know how that works. I'm sorry. No, but she was scared when she knew it was Peter who was Spider-Man. How would her... I'm gonna move on. I don't follow that logic. I'm sorry. I'm not trying to insult. I love theorizing too. I have lots of wrong theories myself. Anyway, yeah, so they get to the rooftop and they have a conversation, and the mask comes off and there's the kiss. And I love, because I was sitting there thinking, really, just like a magical mind unerasing memory kiss? Like, is that really how we're playing it? And then the movie actually called it out, because I wasn't like thinking this is ruining the movie. I was just thinking, this feels a little uh, corny, like I love, but that didn't completely work. And then the movie called it out, and Jean points out through MJ's, having MJ say it, MJ would puke. This is ridiculous. Do you realize how silly I just made you look? And yeah, I appreciate that he tells her this is unforgivable. That's just awful. And later he does tell MJ and apologize. And yeah, I really appreciate how consent was, because that was also, I was a tiny bit worried, like, oh, are we gonna acknowledge that that's a violation of consent? And then Peter confronts Jean about it and later apologizes to MJ. Yeah, I hope a lot of misogynists are taking notes, because that's really, like, I'm not saying that you're personally gonna be dealing with someone who's under mind control, but, Anyway, yeah, and then yeah, as evil MJ, possessed MJ, fantastic, just so chilling. And yeah, Jean makes sure that MJ falls off, like, holy crap. And let's see, so that's when he takes her to Frank's place. And evidently Frank is well aware that he is in a Disney property, and technically Disney owned the Predator franchise. So he set up some traps just in case. or I guess it's a Rambo thing maybe. But that was also, again, fun because it didn't really erase his badassness, but we also get to laugh at like how many of these traps do you need? And then, after all of them seemingly have been triggered, he's like, okay, just watch out for the claymores, okay? Just that's all I ask. I have one rule. Sounds like you have 3 rules. I'm so glad that they did not soften the edges of MJ. Just fantastic. He has guns. Like, he has all the guns in the entire world, and you're gonna, like, confront him about, like, it's just such a fun, and as soon as Frank leaves, she's like, I like him. I think if Frank liked anyone, he might like her too. And I think that does pretty much bring us to the yeah, I do also really appreciate seeing MJ smile in the parts where she's really, really happy. Oh wait, did I already say that earlier in the video? Well, anyway, yeah. And that's one of the places where it works really well, that she does, like, does she smile at all in the first? Well, yeah, let's see. She smiles at Homecoming right before flipping him off. And in the second one, she does smile some. It's especially when they are together and being honest with each other and such. And in No Way Home. And yeah. Anyway, moving on. So let's see. I think, yeah. I really appreciated that. So I don't think we needed to see Paul more than we did, because obviously it wasn't very much. But the fact that by the end they are still together, and Peter doesn't even tell her, oh, you should definitely leave him. He sounds like a jerk. Just like, or wait, did he say something? Well, whatever. She doesn't, at least. And, it is just this thing of like, yeah, she can be a little guarded still. And the thing about, like, am I guarded, Mr. Please ignore the Spider-Man behind the curtain. Let me think. And let's see. Yeah, I think that is what I have to say about that. I just realized I completely forgot to say. Obviously, it's great when, yeah, so Peter recognizes Ned, who doesn't recognize him, in the store. And then we have the thing about, he walks up and he's like, okay, so do you sell these things? Because I'm definitely not buying any. I just know some of my friends have had them. And please remember my face. Even does the profile thing, don't sell any to me. Okay, sell me 2, but then never sell me any again. And then he lets slip that, yeah, he's been drinking them. It's not just his friends. Yeah. And yeah, so Peter follows and goes in there, sees Ned trying to figure out who he is. Housewarming present exchanged, and yeah, I also really appreciate, Paul does come across as nice and clearly does care about both MJ and Ned. You have the thing about, like, look, Ned is still drinking these, and Paul's like, we really got to keep an eye on him. He's not like, again, I wish you wouldn't hang out with him anymore, because they could so easily have made him a jerk. And he really isn't. I mean, I have no idea if he's ever going to be referenced again. It's not impossible that the next one is just going to undo this. I hope not. And let's see. That brings us to the I think that's what was the other the next thing, I guess, is maybe when he goes to the DODC building, because Jean is there because of the tracking and all. And yeah, like, genuinely really great setup. Oh, right. Yeah, Bruce. He talks to Bruce in the college. I know I'm out of order. Maybe we're all out of order. Need to check my batteries later. I mean, I'm not a robot. Whatever a human being who was not a robot, constructed on another planet, sent to Earth to observe, would say. But yeah, Banner. The thing about how, so let's see, the word is okay. Just so I don't forget, I wanted to briefly say, so when MJ talks about, like, I felt like, okay, maybe now I understand. When she says she read the letter, I felt like, okay, now I think I understand what the spell at the end of No Way Home did. But then Ned does remember them in high school together, so now I'm confused again, because MJ didn't seem to really remember him as Peter, even though she also knew him in high school. It's not only the romantic relationship they had. She knows both Peter and Ned at the start of Homecoming, before there's any romantic relationship. So anyway, I mean, I suppose they didn't have a more personal relationship. Okay, yeah, that's got to be what it is. If you have a really personal relationship, then that's, yeah. She knew his name, but didn't really. But no, but isn't that just the thing? Like, they didn't spend a lot of time together, but she was apparently paying a lot of attention to him. Yeah. But was that just because she wanted to figure out if he was Spider-Man? Because she pretends that in Far From Home. Yeah, we're gonna move on. Anyway, with Banner, you have the thing about, like, he's trying to teach them, but they just want to talk Avengers, and that is both a fun idea and also just, you know, it enables them. You have the thing about, like, okay, so is your question about Avengers or physics? And she, lowers her hand, and then it's like, okay, fine, you all want to hear, what is your question about the Avengers? And then, she says the thing about, well, if Thanos wanted to solve overpopulation, why not just make more food or something? Yeah, which is, of course, something that has been posted online ever since Infinity War, hit theaters. And I thought it was fine to briefly address that here, because, of course, yeah, what was he said? Maddie, do you have an answer? Hulk smash. That's why, because then it's not that kind of movie. It's a movie where, characters fight. And so, who would fight the guy who is, like, literally trying to make sure everyone can eat and has a place to live? And I don't know, I guess lots and lots of rich and powerful people all over the world. Okay, fair enough. Anyway, I think that does pretty much. Yeah, so Peter gets to the DODC, and I really cannot overemphasize how much I love the sound design here, because we just hear something hit something else very hard. And we can tell, we get just enough visual cues. Okay, the thing that's being hit is definitely the big metal door. We don't know immediately who or what is hitting it, though. And yeah, that thing about, like, what was it? You can't. What was it? You can't break down the door. No, but maybe he can. And it's kind of, I guess this segues nicely into another brief, another recommendation of an Anthony Guglia video that I watched recently. He did one on why some people say Hulk 2003 is better than MCU Hulk. And in that, he points out that the Hulk should be a monster. And yeah, like, here, they actually did deliver on that. So wonderful. Because that, again, like, I remember reading Hulk comics, and yeah, it is like, we are afraid of him. We are scared of what he's going to do. And this was the first time that the MCU captured that. So they I'm not saying they always get it right, but if you give him enough chances, so far they tend to eventually really, really nail, because that is a piece of feedback that they've gotten 18 years by now, I guess. Wasn't that when Incredible Hulk first came out? Something like that. It that movie did a better job than 2000 Hulk, in my opinion, at that. But yeah, I'd say this is the one where it was the most that ultimately he doesn't end up killing anyone, but he sure got real close, and I think it makes sense to have it be that it is this, mind control is removing all of the yeah, wait, actually, yeah, no, that's only at first, come to think of it, because after, no Banner, no Jean, only Hulk. So yeah, and he is just trying to kill Spider-Man, and it's not that the the planet of Sakaar is cheering him on in a gladiatorial match. It's not that Spider-Man is trying to kill him. It's just pure rage. And that is something that, like we also somewhat have that in Ultron, that also does get, but yeah. And there are already memes comparing how, the first time Daredevil meets Hulk and the first time Punisher does. And yeah, those are fun. No complaints there, no notes. And I suppose that does pretty much. Yeah, it was a great fight, and that's a good way to use Punisher. I that is, of course, we were all wondering how is, what can Punisher possibly do against Hulk. But yeah, I thought that it worked. I really love the part where Peter is using his web to drag Frank away, but it ends up feeling like a John Woo sliding across the floor move, and so he's firing his gun consistently at Hulk, nailing every shot. That was quite fun, but yeah, it didn't feel so, like it's that kind of thing of like, if you're gonna have a character firing a weapon at another character, and we know the other character is never gonna die from that, don't do it for too long, and or have some other element. I do think Incredible Hulk also got that right. I wouldn't necessarily say the MCU has gotten that wrong so far. Not that I can offhand recall. Now, let's see. Yeah, and the inhibitor is also cleverly thought out. And I do think that was worthy. I think that was the only time that anything was thrown directly at the camera in 3D. But having it be and that also reminded me of at least one thing in a Raimi Man movie. And yeah, I thought it was better here. What can I say? But yeah, and the fact that he can't get it on Hulk because it is, the skin is too thick. And that was also, the thing with, hey, if you see me without this, you better run away. And they just rah, and just like in Ultron, it's like, oh, please stop doing that, Bruce. You're not as funny as you think you are. It's just awkward. And yeah, here, later we see the thing on the ground, or no, not on the ground. I think Jean throws it to Peter. And let's see, I think that does get us to the I know there was at least one more thing I really want to say. Yeah, and the very clever with those grenades that end up getting used to, get through the door. And yeah, so that thing about like, no, only non-lethal rounds. Interesting. And yeah, we find out why, not terribly much longer. I also liked MJ telling Frank, you're really going to let him go alone? And then when Frank tells Peter, it's like, Are you blushing under there? That was pretty funny. And yeah, so Peter, goes back to the yeah, and also loved him talking down Hulk, so we do see there is some, you know, he does have a conscience. He doesn't like hurting others. He just loses control of his temper, kind of thing. That worked really well. And the part where he keeps almost falling off the, yeah, I think he does end up, yeah, he ends up falling off the building, being dragged by the massive. I also love seeing, holy crap, it's been too long, in my opinion, since we've last seen Hulk do the, I cannot believe I'm blanking on what it's called, air clap, I think. But the, let's see, yeah, I don't know, maybe Hulk either hates whoever's right down there on the ground, or he knows there's no one there or doesn't care or something. I don't know. These Spider-Man movies do still have a little bit of an issue with collateral damage. You know what I just realized? And I'm here for it. This is the first live action, let's see. Am I gonna spoil? Okay, tell you what. Yeah. I am, while I'm holding my index finger in front of the camera, the up in the frame, I am spoiling every live action Spider-Man movie. Okay, so if you don't want that, skip ahead until you see me lower my index finger, okay? This is the first live action Spider-Man movie that I've watched. I guess, let's see. Starting with the Raimi movies. I forget if there is technically a live action movie from before then, but where the villain is not a, somewhat, at least at times, fun, somewhat good person who becomes evil as soon as there's some kind of science experiment, and then they're like sadistic and cruel and harming innocent people and such. Well, okay, technically, in case of Homecoming, it wasn't a science thing; it was the DODC taking over. But yeah, I don't think we need that for all of them, and I really appreciate how they handled it here instead. No more spoilers for other live action, for live action Spider-Man that isn't MCU continuity. Or yeah, MCU specifically, because I guess technically doesn't No Way Home technically make those other movies continuity as well, so I'm not spoiling those. Anyway, I think that does bring us nicely to the, yeah, so yeah, Peter does end up putting the inhibitor on Jean, and then we get the thing about, who's Sarah? And he lies, and MJ helps Peter realize it was a lie, inadvertently so. And yeah, so Peter goes back to Frank's, and they talk about the letter. I think by now I've said all that I really wanted to about that. I'm sure a bunch of grifter chuds are going to hate it, or at least pretend they do. I know there's a different comic book adaptation that has gotten really harsh reaction for a similar thing, but it's a spoiler to say which. Anyway, I just really appreciate they actually respect her character. Like, they think of, imagine if a real life human being was in this situation, how would they react, And let's see, I think, yeah, and then we have the thing about, I don't have a phone, so can you take me home? And, it's awkward, but he says yes, because, like, she didn't do anything wrong. It's not her fault that this situation is a little bit of an emotional mess, And then, once he's swung her back there, she's like, do you want to come up? And it's like, because she doesn't love him. She said so, but she also doesn't, it's not this thing of like, oh, she just hates his guts and never ever wants to see him again, kind of thing, And yeah, it was nice seeing, you know, Ned and yeah, the interaction again, and the Tolkien references. I'm here for those. And MJ, you know, enjoying those as well. And then we see she does still draw, and now it's not people in distress or crises, I think she said, like in Homecoming. And I suppose that there's at least one more thing I really wanted to make sure to say, but I'm struggling to recall exactly what it was. Let's see. The yeah, the Spidey tracker was also fun. And then the thing about shit. Okay, so it's saying that the quality is going to decrease. Sorry, there's not really anything I can do about it. Anyway, the I know I said the video is PG-13, but technically there's at least one S word in the movie as well. Anyway, yeah, let's see. Yeah, later, you know, Frank also has it, and that's, you know, he's I've got eyes and ears everywhere, and then we see he's using that. Anyway, I think that does bring us nicely to the yeah. So the you know, contacting Yelena again, and she is still in that room, although this time she's, you know, dressed. And then the thing about, you know, at first they're right out of frame, and then they can't help it. They jump into frame like, you mean illegal human experimentation? And again, Yelena's just like, hi. And, you know, Peter's like, I am so sorry. You know, and she's like, I'm just glad the sad man has friends. Because, you know, again, Yelena in like the Black Widow solo movie would probably not have taken that as well. And yeah, you know, she's grown. And let's see, then we have the thing about, that's when we see the experiment. And that was also handled really well. And the visuals there with those bright light things, you know, behind and in front of her, and the way that the, you know, she's like tied to the chair, and the walls go up, and there's glass all around. It's just, yeah, really, really well done. And then, you know, we get the memory of Sarah, and I am so glad to get to watch Sadie Sink act again, because she really impressed me in The Whale, and I've heard she's great in Stranger Things, which I guess might be where she got the idea to possibly play a character with psychic abilities. I have never watched that show. I'm not sure I ever will. And let's see, the but yeah, you know, look at how different she is. She is smiling, she's optimistic. You know, there's the thing about, like, I mean, mom loved us until we developed our powers, you know, which Sarah doesn't even acknowledge at first. And Sarah's response is, well, if you can't love someone who's different, then you shouldn't be a parent. I know we're supposed to think of Sarah as very cynical. I happen to agree with that. I try not to be cynical. I do think that is accurate. And this, again, you know, I'm sorry. Sue me, throw me in jail, you know, throw away the key, throw away the cell. I think that the MCU so far are doing a better job on the X-Men than the Fox, you know, movies did, in some regards, not all, because this is one of the core elements of these stories, this rejection. You know, they also got it in, you know, in Deadpool 3, they, you know, not only did they get that right with just as general, some general stuff, although, you know, I appreciate theirs pretty much just said, but that also got some of the darkest sides of Wolverine's character that we hadn't really seen in one of the live action movies by that point. But here we also, you know, yeah, we have the, you know, parents rejecting and how it actually affects them, because the thing is, this is a Jean who's not met Xavier yet. and that's not really something we've seen that much in the movies. I'm almost done rewatching The Gifted. That show also gets that right, so it's not, and I appreciate that was technically also Fox. I'm fairly confident, at least, but in the movies, I just don't think they completely got it's sometimes they at least got close. But here, like, this really felt to me like, yeah, this is what would happen in this kind of, just, yeah, absolutely nailed it. And let's see, Sarah taught her about the mind hopping, and goes to get them both ice cream, and is taken. And we find out not long after this bit that she ended up being tortured to death, experimented upon to death. Yeah, and it's no wonder that Jean became so hardened after that. You know, this was the oh wait, crap. I guess that does technically mean that this is another Spider-Man villain who ended up really cruel and sadistic, and I guess no, yeah. Whoops. I don't know how yeah, whatever. Moving on. The anyway, yeah, so I think that does bring us nicely to the let's see. Yeah, and then we see, what is VMAX, and it's, Vent Fan Max. The last thing she ever saw was that vent. Just, yeah. And so Spider-Man makes his way to the building, and Punisher is on his way there, and the let's see, we have the part where Peter, let me think, you have right, for the experiment they turn off the inhibitor, and then her power evolves because of a traumatic experience, the death of her sister, you know X gene activation kind of thing, which also, that relates to, because that was what happened with Spider-Man. So at that point, they don't even need to explain why it happened, because we've seen it happen multiple times with Spidey by then. And let's see, I guess that but yeah, so she becomes powerful enough that they can't stop her, and yeah, I this is my new favorite of the, seeing the telepathy freezing a bunch of people, better than even the best of the Fox movies at that. And let's see, I think, right, I gotta mention, I love that tracking shot where we see a bunch of people one by one be possessed. Like, that must have taken ages to plan and time and get exactly right, because if the camera or possession acting is just slightly ahead of each other, then you have to start over, and yeah, it really helped sell the I also love the point of view shot of swinging, which also, there was a tiny bit of that in well, I guess, yeah, it was maybe the same amount actually, but in Webman 1 there was also a bit like that. The trailer made it look like there was going to be an entire sequence, and then I don't know, was it, I forget, I feel like I heard it once, was it like motion sickness maybe either happened, or there was concern about it, which I do appreciate. But the yeah, this time it didn't feel like, back then it did kind of feel like a ripoff of or not ripoff, but it felt too much like Mirror's Edge. It felt like just trying to, you know, do the same thing, where here it just felt, I don't know, more integrated in a way that yeah, anyway, moving on. The so the but yeah, and generally clever, this thing of, like, basically it's impossible to get past that wall of psychic energy, and this poor dog standing there barking because it's confused. Why is person just standing there like that? Doesn't make any sense. Is that one dog being there why this, like the Odyssey, had a trailer for Heart of the Beast? I think that's what that movie's called, with what looks like a very good boy. Because I could definitely see it for the Odyssey, because there's the thing with the dog there, but this one didn't have a lot of dog stuff. Maybe it's just because they're both action movies, whatever. Anyway, but yeah, so, Punisher has to go, find a rooftop to prepare to snipe. And it takes him a little while because he struggles to find one that Spider-Man hasn't peed on. And meanwhile, fantastic fight between Spidey and some DODC. And I love Jean pointing out, isn't it interesting that they made a weapon specifically, uniquely qualified to take you out? Who do they think they are? Batman? And him fighting the Hand with the throwing stars and those sticks with electricity and all that, did also love the fight against the DODC outside, although I will admit I thought it was a little corny, the thing about, like, why did they let him stretch, But let's see. But yeah, basically now that he has delivered Jean, there's no goodwill anymore. They're not going to just let him anything, And let's see. I think so yeah, he was turned into a tool. He was objectified by the DODC, and they no longer need this tool. And it would be difficult for them to hunt him down, but if he comes to the building, they'll try to take him out, And yeah, the fact that Peter can only defeat the Hand by embracing the mutation was great. And it felt so earned, He keeps denying himself, and finally he embraces and becomes more powerful, fully. Yeah. And yeah, I love the bit with, it was a great flashback. I will never say no to watching the acting of Marisa Tomei. And yeah, the thing about, like, she just, if they do make more of these solo movies, I mean, I'm up for more of these flashbacks, because I would really, really miss her if they make even one that she doesn't appear at all in. But the thing about, like, oh, you think you don't have to listen to me just because you have superpowers? And then the thing about, things can change really, really fast. And the fact that we see it first, like, just Peter thinking back to the original, and then later when Jean is in there and it's her, and she's the one getting the hug from May, and because it's so clear, like, she just needs this tenderness, she needs affection, she needs to not feel so alone, because this is around the time where, she I believe this is shortly after she said, you can't trust anyone, so you have to hurt them before they hurt you, or something like that. They don't trust you, so you can't trust them, something along those lines. And yeah, I mean, that, dude, philosophy obviously explains why she behaves the way she does. And let's see, I think that does bring us to the but yeah, and she is actually redeemed, and of course nobody told Frank that, so he fires, and the sound design, the fact that we just hear the bullet slowly getting closer, and then Peter's like, oh no, and does the Secret Service dive, and just, yeah, fantastic. And Frank actually feels bad. I also didn't think we needed the bit where he's like lying there snoring, which also is like, so did she just leave, or is he lying to protect Jean, or how does he know she only just left if he's been asleep? I don't know. I didn't necessarily think that completely worked. I think if they were going to have a joke there related to that, I think it should have been that Peter wakes up and like looks around and Frank is just sitting there with his eyes closed. And then Peter's like, Frank, I know you're awake. Stop pretending, and Frank could say something like, I thought you might want, just a minute to readjust. But okay, yes, I'm awake. But yeah, she used her psychic powers for good, not to harm anyone, not to manipulate or take control away from someone, but to heal someone who gave her back hope. She didn't have to do that. She didn't need him alive physically for her own safety. Not anymore. He already took the bullet. But she did it because it was the right thing to do, and this is her becoming more like because last we see her, she's on a bus headed somewhere. I mean, this gifted youngster, I'm guessing, is headed to a school. And I think that does pretty much. Yeah, also the fact that, earlier Frank had said, I would never put on a mask. And then he does for Peter. And I think that is... I do also really appreciate... I mean, they almost must have planned this, right? Because that was like... Have they even done... I don't think they've done the handshake since the first movie, where they do it like twice, if I recall correctly. But yeah, that's how Ned recognizes Peter. And I think that does pretty much... I feel like there's at least one more thing I really wanted to make sure to say here, but I'm struggling to recall exactly what it is. Yeah, I think that... Right, obviously there's the post-credit scene, so yeah, it's cute. The thing about like, oh, Spider-Man has been sighted in space. The local CinemaSins pair were in my theater. That's a joke. I'm not saying literally. But this one guy said, well, Spider-Man's been to space before. It's not that big a deal. And then a woman next to him said, I think the more pressing question is, who updated the app? Who in space is sending that? Which, very true. Like, seriously, what? Yeah. That is amazing reception. If Elon Musk watches this movie, I wonder how much taxpayer money he's going to pour into a hopeless venture to make space internet happen. And I suppose, or cell coverage, whatever. Mobile data, something. I feel like there was at least one more thing that I really wanted to make sure to say. Yeah, the two calls between T and Spidey, with the thing of like, is that Spider-Man? I can't say. That means it's Spider-Man. And then, well, one of them is named Poppy. I can tell that. I just heard you say that, which I did appreciate. That was an actual joke. He's not that, that would be pretty silly. Obviously it's a nickname, but they're no, I don't have to explain it. Whatever. Moving on. There at the end, he says, say, how are, and then now he knows their names because he's relating to her as a person. He is letting people into his life, even if, hardly anyone knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. That was also the part where MJ said, take the mask off. I deserve to see your face while we're having this conversation. Fantastic. And I love, again, like, this feels like such emotionally intelligent writing in my personal experience. And from what I understand from hearing many others, a lot of the time, women don't want endless apologies from men. They want to understand why we did or said something, and they want it processed, you know. And yeah, I've seen so many misogynistic men insist otherwise, and yeah, it's one of those things. I forget who said it, but there was someone who pointed out that this whole idea of women being terrible communicators, it's kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Like, if you're a misogynistic man who assumes that, then you might just mentally mangle anything a woman says to you and then act like, oh, well, why did she say that? Oh, she didn't say that. That's just what you interpreted it as, instead of just listening to what she actually said. And I suppose that does pretty much cover. I feel like there was one more thing that I wanted to say. So we do spend more time and give more dramatic weight and heft to MJ having been lied to by Peter than Ned. I'm not going to pretend like men cannot also have deep and meaningful relationships with each other. Absolutely. And it doesn't have to be romantic. It can be platonic. But this is a case where, I wouldn't necessarily even say that that's always the case, but this was a case where this romantic relationship was deeper than the relationship. There was a strong friendship between Peter and Ned, but the relationship between Peter and MJ went beyond that, and thus hers was the, yeah. And she was also the one put in danger by this whole thing. And I guess that does pretty much cover everything. I don't know if we needed to have Frank Castle, the Punisher, tell Peter Parker that was the bravest thing I've ever seen. But I do appreciate him trying to apologize, and then Peter being like, no, you don't have to apologize. That whole thing, it didn't need to be played for laughs, but other than that, it was great. And I suppose that does pretty much, I think that is everything I have to say about this film. So, yeah, I don't know, I guess I'll just very briefly note, yeah, I am really loving the way that they are gradually introducing, I mean, I guess it's not always X-Men, but like mutants, Wonder Man, Ms. Marvel, Jean are mutants that are in this continuity, and there's in this universe. In another universe, you do have, I'm afraid I forget her code name, but Rambo and Kelsey Grammer's Beast, and yeah, just I really appreciate that there has not been a single mutant character in the MCU that is just like standing around and not really. Oh, okay, maybe a little in Deadpool 3. Some of them were basically just there for muscle, but it was a much bigger problem in the Fox ones. Yeah, I guess that does cover. So I'll admit that it's been so long since I read, but I don't offhand remember this being, at least not the continuity I read of X-Men, Jean Grey's backstory. But I mean, then again, experimentation on mutants, it's not unheard of.